Hello and welcome. Today we're going to talk about the staff and the clefs. I know many of you guys have seen scores such as this one here. Of course, this one being Let It Be by the Beatles, a very famous song. And for a beginner, all of this might look a little intimidating at first, a little overwhelming, because we have different notes, we have different lines everywhere, symbols, lyrics. So the goal when we're learning music theory, of course, is so we can identify these notes, decipher some of these symbols, or so we can either reproduce what we see here at our own instruments, or even better, create our own music. So let's begin here at the very top. As you can see, we have these two symbols here. We call these clefs. Okay, so we have two different clefs. And the other thing we're going to learn about today is the staff. As you guys can see, these horizontal lines that are behind these notes throughout the whole music here, that's the staff. So let's circle some of the staff that we see here, and of course we see more staff here, and so that's called the staff. Okay, two very important things in music theory. And of course, Let It Be, it's a new song relatively to how long music theory has been around. So now let's take a look at a different example of an older piece that you might recognize. As you can hear in the background, we have this very famous piece called Farlise, written by the great composer Beethoven. Okay, so Farlise was written in 1810. It was composed in 1810, and Let It Be was released in 1970. So that's more than 100 years apart from each other. But if we take a look at the score, we still have the same clefs, and also we have the staff. You guys can see that the lines behind the notes are pretty much the same that we had in Let It Be. So even though these two pieces are more than 100 years apart from each other, they still have the same symbols and the same staff. So it's pretty much like these two things are pretty much the backbone of music notation. So that's why we're starting with this. So now let's really dive into these two topics, the staff and the clefs. As we can see here, we have three different clefs. We have the treble clef, the bass clef, and the alto clef. And in music, we have more than three clefs, but these three are the most commonly used. And these three clefs have also different names. The treble clef is known as the G clef. The bass clef is known as the F clef. The alto clef is known as the C clef. And the word clef comes from the French meaning key. And this was short for key note. Okay, so for the treble clef, the key note is G. For the bass clef, the key note is F. And for the alto clef, the key note is C. If this sounds confusing, it's okay. We're going to get more into the musical alphabet in the next video. But for right now, you just need to know that this is called the treble or G clef. This one here is called the bass or F clef. And this one here is called the alto or C clef. Now, why don't we draw our first staff so then we can connect the staff with the clefs. So if you have a piece of paper and a pen, you can do this as well. The first thing you need to know about the staff is that it has 5 lines. So let's make 5 lines. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. Okay, so now let's close this at the beginning and at the top as well. Now, why don't we number these lines? Always start from the bottom up. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 lines. So let's write down 5 lines. And then also you can see between the lines there are spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4. Let's number these ones as well. 1, 2, 3, 4. So staff has 4 spaces. Okay. Okay, so here we have a blank staff. So let's take a look at different elements of the staff. Let's make two lines, one here and another one here. These are called bar lines. Bar lines. Okay, so we have one and two bar lines. And let's make another little line here. And this we're gonna call a double bar line. Double bar line. You'll see the double bar line at the end of a song, at the end of a piece, at the end of a section or movement. So you'll use the double bar line to close something. Okay. Now, as you guys can see here, we have 1, 2, and 3 different boxes. Why don't we number these ones? 1, 2, and 3. Okay. And these boxes, we're going to call them measures. So we have 1, 2, and 3 measures, and we have 2 bar lines. Okay. Now that we have our blank staff, why don't we start adding our clefs into it? Let's begin with the treble clef. So we can see here, in this graph, this is the evolution of the treble clef. So we can see here the first one that we had as a treble clef, it was just a plain looking G. And throughout the ages, it just got fancier and fancier. So you could say that the one that we have today, it's a fancy G. And the importance of a clef is that they serve as a reference point. So in this case, a reference point would be the second line. Our second line. Why don't we highlight the second line here? As you can see, the treble clef is showcasing the second line. And the one that we have today, we even have a little X that goes through it. Almost like a little bullseye that goes right through the second line. So on the staff, when we have our treble clef, only when we have our treble clef, the second line is known as the G line, which means on this line, we're going to have a G note. Once we talk about the musical alphabet, this will make more sense. Let's draw a treble clef. The first thing you need to do is make sure to place your pen or pencil on the second line. And I'll try my best here. There it is, a treble clef. So I won't give you steps by steps of how to draw a treble clef or trace one, because try to be creative. Try to come up with your own version of the treble clef. If we see here, these are treble clefs of different composers. You can see Beethoven's is just a little line here, Schubert's, Brahms, Debussy, Ravel. As long as you're showcasing the G line, then I think everything's fair game. So as long as you just make it look something similar to this and showcase the G line or highlight the G line, then you know it's a treble clef. So be creative with it. Okay, now let's talk about the bass clef. So the bass clef, as you can see in this graph, this is the evolution of the F clef. It started out as an F, just like the G clef, it started out as a G. And throughout the ages, it just got fancier. And if we connect these two dots at the end with the symbol, we still end up with something that looks like an F, okay? And just like the treble clef, the F clef is going to serve as a reference line. And if you can guess, that reference line is going to be in between the two little dots, which is the fourth line. 1, 2, 3, 4. The fourth line. So let's write down here. That's the reference line for the F clef. Okay? So let's change the colors here and that line. Oops, let's make that a little straighter. That would be the F line. Meaning that if you place a note in that line, it would be the F note, which is your reference point. So when you start adding other notes, you know that that note would be the F note. Okay, so now why don't we draw an F clef? So all you need to do is just put your pencil or pen, place it on the fourth line, and then draw a little semicircle, and then almost like a question mark and then the two little dots in between the fourth line. Okay, why don't we try that again? And just like the treble clef, you can be a little creative with this. You can make it a little fancier, but there's really not much going on compared to the treble clef. Okay, so that's the bass clef. And also, we need to be aware that just because we have the bass clef here, that doesn't mean that the second line is the G line anymore. Remember, every time you have a clef here, that changes the reference line. So for when you have a treble clef, the reference line is the G. So that means that your staff is going to go according to the clef. The same thing with the bass clef, and we'll see that is the same thing with the alto clef. So remember, only on the bass clef, the fourth line is the F line. Only in the treble clef, the second line is the G line, okay? Okay, now let's talk about the alto clef or C clef. And the alto clef is not as it's not often used compared to the treble or bass clef. The treble and bass clef are heavily used. Many instruments use them. But the alto clef, if you're going into orchestration or writing for strings, then you should definitely know the alto clef, especially because the viola uses the alto clef. Now let's take a look at this graph right here, and just like the other ones, this is the evolution of the alto clef. So it started out looking just like a C. So the reference line being this one right here, and throughout the ages, for some reason, they just get fancier. And what we have today is the alto clef, and this one's pretty easy to pinpoint. The reference line is the middle one. There's a little almost arrow pointing at the backward arrow pointing at the middle line or the third line. 1, 2, 3. So the third line is the important one on the alto clef. 1, 2, 3. So let's put here our reference line, and that would be the C line. Okay, C line. And just like the other clefs, that means that when we have an alto clef here, only the third line is the C line, okay? Now, why don't we attempt to draw an alto clef? An alto clef is definitely a little challenging compared to the other ones because I think you can be more creative with it. So let's try. Let's give it a shot right here. So let's put first 2 lines, and then the way that I do it, it's like this. Put a little arrow, and then there you go. That's the way that I do the alto clef. But of course, you can try to do something like this one here, or this is, I've seen people do just one line and then just do this. That's also an alto clef, or just one line and then do that. So you have an arrow pointing at the third line, okay? In this video, we went over the treble, the bass, and the alto clef, and the staff. And on our next video, we're going to talk about the musical alphabet and or the musical notes. And we're going to see how we can place our notes into our staff and how our clefs are going to help us determine where to put those notes. Okay, so if you have any questions or comments, you can just place them on the comments below, or you can rewind this video and watch it from the beginning again. So I'll see you in the next video. Bye-bye.